The Forgotten Carnival. Chapter 1. The Invitation. The invitation arrived on a cold, rainy evening, slipped under the door of Clara's apartment. It was an old, yellowed piece of paper, the edges frayed and the ink faded. The words were written in a spidery, almost illegible hand. You are cordially invited to the Forgotten Carnival, a night of wonders, mysteries, and horrors beyond your wildest imagination. Come alone, midnight, follow the lanterns. Clara stared at the invitation, her heart pounding. She had heard rumors of the Forgotten Carnival, a traveling show that appeared only once every few decades, always in the dead of night. It was said to be a place of magic and terror, where the line between reality and nightmare blurred. She had always been drawn to the mysterious, the unexplained. The thrill of uncovering hidden truths outweighed the nagging fear at the back of her mind. And so, despite the warnings that echoed like faint whispers in her head, Clara decided to go. Chapter 2. The Lanterns. At midnight, Clara followed the lanterns. They hung in the air like glowing orbs, casting an eerie, flickering light on the path ahead. The forest was dense and dark, the trees twisted and gnarled, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and decay, and the wind carried with it the faint sound of whispers as if the trees themselves were speaking. As she walked deeper into the forest, the lanterns grew brighter, their light more intense. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, taking on a rhythm that echoed her heartbeat. Clara felt a growing sense of unease. She wanted to turn back, but something compelled her to keep going. It was as if the forest itself would not let her leave. And then, she saw it. Chapter 3. The Carnival. The Forgotten Carnival was a sight to behold. It was a sprawling, chaotic maze of tents and stalls, each one more bizarre than the last. The air was thick with the smell of popcorn and cotton candy, but there was something else beneath a faint, metallic tang that made Clara's stomach churn. The carnival was alive with activity, the sounds of laughter and music filling the air. But there was something off about the people. Their movements were too fluid, too precise, and their eyes were hollow and empty, like marionettes dancing on invisible strings. Clara wandered through the carnival, her senses overwhelmed by the sights and sounds. She passed a fortune-teller's tent, a freak show, a hall of mirrors, each one more unsettling than the last. Faces reflected back at her that didn't quite match her own. But it was the big top that caught her attention, pulsing with a strange magnetic energy. Chapter 4. The Big Top. The Big Top was a massive red and white striped tent, its entrance flanked by two towering clowns. Their faces were painted with grotesque smiles, their eyes glowing with a cold, malevolent light. Their grins seemed to widen as she approached, though their expressions never shifted. Clara hesitated, but the clowns beckoned her inside with synchronized, puppet-like gestures. The interior of the tent was dark and musty, the air thick with the smell of sawdust and sweat. The audience was a sea of blank, expressionless faces, their eyes fixed on the center ring, unblinking. The ringmaster stepped into the spotlight, his face hidden beneath a black mask adorned with symbols Clara didn't recognize. He welcomed the audience to the main event, his voice cold and hollow, echoing as if spoken from somewhere far away. And then, the show began. Chapter 5. The Performers. The performers were unlike anything Clara had ever seen. There was a contortionist who bent her body in impossible ways, her joints popping with grotesque ease, her eyes wide and unblinking like glass marbles. A strongman who lifted weights that seemed to defy the laws of physics, his muscles bulging unnaturally as if something inside was trying to escape. And a fire eater who breathed flames that burned with an unnatural green light, his skin untouched by the heat. But it was the final act that chilled Clara to the bone. A woman stepped into the ring, her face hidden beneath a delicate black veil. She began to sing, her voice hauntingly beautiful, but there was something wrong with it. The notes were too high, too sharp, and they seemed to pierce Clara's very soul, reverberating through her bones. As the woman sang, the audience began to change, their faces twisted and contorted, their eyes glowing with a cold, malevolent light. Clara felt a chill run through her as she realized the truth: the audience wasn't human, or at least not anymore. Chapter 6. The Escape. Clara knew that she had to get out of the Big Top. She pushed her way through the crowd, her heart pounding in her chest. The performers turned to watch her, their eyes filled with a cold, calculating light, their movements too smooth, as if rehearsed countless times before. She burst out of the tent and ran through the carnival, the whispers growing louder, more insistent. They seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, echoing inside her mind. The lanterns began to flicker and die, their light fading into darkness, leaving her stumbling in the oppressive black. Clara ran until she could run no more, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She turned back to look at the carnival, but it was gone. The forest was silent, the air thick with the smell of damp earth and decay, as if nothing had ever been there. Chapter 7. The Aftermath. Clara returned to her apartment, exhausted but relieved. The Forgotten Carnival was gone, its horrors left behind in the forest. But the relief was short-lived. As she walked through her apartment, she noticed something strange. The shadows seemed darker, more pronounced, and she could feel a presence, cold and malevolent, watching her from the corners of her vision. Reflections in mirrors lingered a moment too long, and sometimes, when she turned quickly, she thought she saw the faint outline of carnival tents in the distance. She knew that the carnival was still there, lurking beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to return. Or perhaps it had never truly left. Chapter 8. The Legacy. Clara never spoke of what happened at the Forgotten Carnival. She moved to a new city, determined to leave the past behind, but the carnival followed her. She could feel its presence, cold and oppressive, lurking in the corners of her mind. She heard the faint echo of carnival music when there was no source, and sometimes invitations appeared under her door, even when she moved apartments. She knew that it was only a matter of time before it returned, and when it did, she would be ready. Or so she told herself. Epilogue. The Forgotten Carnival still exists, hidden away in a dark, forgotten corner of the world. But sometimes, on a cold, dark night, if you listen closely, you can hear the whispers of the Forgotten Carnival, calling out to you, begging you to come back. But beware, for once you enter, you may never leave. The end.